evening's conversation on improving Trinidad and Tobago's external competitiveness. The McKinsey Global Institute defines competitiveness as the capacity to sustain economic growth either through increasing productivity or expanding employment. Given the severe economic headwinds facing Trinidad and Tobago at present, the topic of this evening's conversation is a particularly judicious one. This conversation is being hosted by the Trade and Economic Development Unit, TEDU for short, at the University of the West Indies. For some time now, the TEDU has been using its national conversation platform as a forum to facilitate engagement between experts on the economy of Trinidad and Tobago. The objective of these conversations is to ensure that the public is informed of critical information and analysis of the economy in a timely manner. So I just would like to welcome everyone to this evening's discussion. On this evening's panel, we have Dr. Roger Hussain, the head of TEDU and a senior economist at the University of the West Indies, Mr. Navin Dukaran, the CEO of Exim Bank, Ms. Franca Costello, the president of TTMA, Ms. Nirmala Debisingh Prasad, the CEO of NAMDevco, Ms. Vashti Gayadeen, the CEO of TTCSI, and Mr. Kevin Ramnarayan, the former Minister of Energy. Now, just a couple of announcements. First, please ensure that your microphones are muted when you're not speaking to prevent feedback. Second, please note that this session is being recorded and is live streamed on YouTube. And third, if you have any chat questions, there are two options. You can either do so verbally during the question and answer period, or you can use the Zoom chat feature. And either Rebecca or myself will ensure that your question is asked or you're given the opportunity to speak. Now, this evening's conversation will proceed as follows. We will begin with a presentation by Dr. Hussain, followed by contributions from Mr. Navin Dukaran, Ms. Franca Costello, Mr. Mala Debisingh Prasad, Ms. Vashti Gayadeen, and Mr. Kevin Ramnarayan. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Dr. Hussain to begin with his presentation. Dr. Hussain.
Thank you. So good night, everyone.
Good night.
In the context of the state of the Trinidad and Tobago economy, I keep thinking about what type of national conversations we should be having to hit the nail on the head, to bring this thing exactly to where the conversation should be. And, I spend a lot of time thinking about this economy, trying to understand it, trying to become intimately familiar with it so that we could find avenues alongside the thinking of my other colleagues to help bail this economy out. And the more I think about it is, the more I see us in this really trying position where a combination of interventions would be necessary to get this economy going again. Between 2015 and 2020, given the announced contraction in economic activity by the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, who I have to assume would be speaking from a position of fact, of 10%, it means that we have lost or we have declined about 18% in real GDP. And that's an enormous decline. In fact, if we assume moderate growth of 2% in 2021, and for every year thereafter until 2030, it would take this country until 2030 to reach back to 2015 level of income. And there is something wrong about that. There is something wrong about that in the sense that you are producing so much oil and gas, and yet still you are not moving the economy forward. And therefore, there is something fundamentally wrong with the logic of how we approach getting economic growth in the economy. And I think if we can work on non-energy export sector growth in particular, that we would get the ball moving in the right direction. And so the people on this panel tonight, you know, I thought about this thing and I thought about who could get agriculture going, who could get manufacturing going, who would know how to get any energy going, who will know how to get services going, and then of course who would pay for it all. And so I try to think about it in that light. I would just spend a few minutes giving an overview of what I call an export-led growth perspective, because at the end of the day, if we don't push an export-led growth perspective, we are going to end up in an even worse position than we are. I see Mr. Dukaran is online. Winston Dukaran, I publicly acknowledge him. I read the first draft of the economic recovery document and I was very concerned. And I raised my concern publicly, but then I was told, okay, a second draft would be out. I got a copy of a second draft and I started to read it. And then I was told, well, hold on, it's not officially out until Monday. So I did the ethical thing and I put it away until Monday. I will read it on Monday. And then I would make my views, comments public. What I hope is that, as had happened with the Economic Development Advisory Board, I hope a lot of good ideas are not pushed forward and then it is pushed in a corner underneath 2,000 books in a ministry, or we lose the soft copy, which is probably some of the explanation as to why we never use these documents. But I hope that the economic recovery document, consisting of the views of 22 senior professionals and technocrats in Trinidad and Tobago, form the platform from which economic growth and a more export-oriented performance in the Trinidad and Tobago economy would eventually take place. So I like to start off these type of conversations from a position of fact.
Dr. Hussain, please use presentation view. Great, thank you.
And the first thing we need to fix to get this thing correct is the real effective exchange rate. And if I were to be called by the powers that be and asked, what do you think we should do? How should we go about targeting this reformation of the economy? And I were to choose one variable. The first variable I would choose is the real effective exchange rate. And I would try to design a formula in 2020 to remove the 27% appreciation of the real effective exchange rate that it is now as compared to 2010, and think about how I could do that. And I see we have been trying an internal devaluation. We have been trying to keep the interest rate as low as we could, and it hasn't been working. In fact, I worked it out 2 days ago, and it will take until 2084 to use the internal devaluation to correct the exchange rate. So the extent of appreciation of the exchange rate. So I'm not sure if we are aiming at 2084, which is possible, or if we are going to change strategy come October the 5th. So, you know, much of the early thinkers, and for example, Adam Smith, and that should be 1776, not 1996, said that by opening a more extensive market for whatever part of the produce of their labor may exceed the home consumption, it encourages them to improve its productive power and to augment its annual produce to the utmost, and thereby to increase real revenue and wealth of society. And I deliberately took this type of approach to the conversation tonight because we are started back. We are teaching via online mode, and I am looking forward to the students asking us questions and seeing how we interface the practical conversations with the actual literature. One of the things that guides a lot of my thinking in this country, and I hope it extends to the policymakers, is what Bertil Ohlin and Eli Heckscher said in 1933, and I quote, they said that a nation should produce and export those commodities that have an abundance of factors of production and import those commodities that call for factor proportions in the opposite direction. Simple to me, that sounds reasonable, logical, and sensible. And therefore, if I were a policymaker, I would promote goods in which we have comparative advantage and for which there is external demand. One of the things about an outward-oriented strategy and pushing more export-oriented growth is, as Ann Kruger said, when you are dealing with quantitative restrictions, you promote monopolistic power. And by engaging in freer trade and a greater degree of outward orientation, you remove that monopolistic power, and therefore people cannot really go after making rents. You remove and dissipate those type of rents in the economy. Grossman and Helpman, and I think Helpman is one of the best economists the world produced in the last 30 years. They, via endogenous growth theory, which is using ideas basically to generate economic growth, show how international trades affects a country's growth performance by broadening the communication channels of nations. You don't only want to be trading with Guyana or Jamaica. You want to broaden the list of countries you trade with, forcing entrepreneurs to adopt best practice technology and ideas, and to constantly be seeking to reduce the cost of production. That's what competition does. And allowing domestic firms to target a larger market and encouraging more efficient resource allocation. And that more efficient resource allocation is one of the problems in the Trinidad and Tobago economy, especially as pertains to the labor market. And I see lots of commentary being made, but I have not really seen any policy maker tackle the labor force participation rate, which just as importantly as the ethnic tension in the economy, I see it perhaps more importantly and perhaps as the #1 problem in the Trinidad and Tobago economy. You cannot develop the Trinidad and Tobago economy with a labor force participation rate of 58%. It would not work. Unless we could push that to 72%, 70% around there, we are in big trouble. And I hope when the Minister of Finance speaks on October the 5th or on September the 28th, I hear a nice long session on the labor force participation rate and what are the reasons for the increasing number of out of the labor force and how we tackle those things. I've been waiting for 5 years, but I'm hoping that we have a rebirth and it will start from Monday. Increasing returns to scale. Firms can benefit from increasing returns to scale when they indulge in promoting exports. For many developing countries, the limited purchasing capacity of their population restrict indigenous firms to high operating costs, and in many cases, their plants have excess or spare capacity. So we need to export. And I really had a lot of hope and have a lot of hope for the e-tech park that was developed in Muruga. And I hope that e-tech park becomes export-oriented. And I think e-tech is one of the vehicles in this trying times through which we could extract some foreign exchange, we could crowd in some private sector capital, and we could trigger a better tomorrow. So the way forward, just to give that basic kind of theoretical kind of platform to me, and I just put down 4 points here. I would elaborate on this in question and answer session, is increase export orientation. I think the right type of people are on this chat here in terms of the panel to speak to export orientation. I think we need to push the tech parks. I have heard lots of commentary. I don't understand at all why we closed down the Economic Development Advisory Board or allowed a gifted economist like Terence Farrell to leave. I hope there are plans to revive it. We need to incentivize exporting, and I know Navin would speak to that, especially in terms of at the margin. How can we get firms who are going to bring in the next 100 million US? How can we facilitate their production some more? And of course, one of the things that this country hates to do is trade-based research. I have been saying for years, and you know, I watched this economy crash. I watched this economy go down a precipice in many ways. And I've been saying to the Ministry of Trade, let us develop a formula whereby with any partial scope agreement, we calculate the commodities for which we have comparative advantage and that are on upswing in those markets. So not only are we strong, but that these people buy, so that we have a higher probability of success if we build an e-tech park, for example, a theme park around that. So let's say, for example, we sign a partial scope agreement with Panama, and we know that Panama likes scorpion pepper sauce from research. And this is it. It mustn't come from a whim or a fancy or a minister having 10 acres of lands to plant pepper. No, it must come from science. And then we intervene, and using that partial scope agreement specifically produced via trade-based research, the type of commodities we should. In fact, I think we should give to the Exim Bank, and I've raised this with the relevant people in different places, a calculated list of comparative advantage commodities that are missed opportunities, meaning that we are strong in it and the foreign country wants to buy more, so that our potential exporters can see that. And to me, that's a scientific way of improving the probability of success or minimizing the probability of failure. And we could talk about that more in the question and answer session. So I thank you, and I will stop there and let others have their speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution, Dr. Hussain. Next, we'd like to invite Mr. Navin Dukaran to give his contribution. Mr. Dukaran. Excuse Mr. Dukaran, you'd have to unmute your mic. Thank you.
Good, yes. Well, first of all, let me say thanks to the Trade Development Unit at the Department of Economics and UE for inviting me here. I'm quite pleased to be added onto this list of very esteemed individuals who have specific sector focuses. And I realized when Roger went through the list, I realized, oh, wait, I don't really have a specific sector's focus. But we do, because we are primarily right now manufacturing and oriented to our manufacturing sector. And in fact, one of the things I want to say right off the bat with respect to, I know Franco will go into more details, but in terms of the strategy and so on, but I was lucky to be included in a strategy formulation planning at the TTIB. And I must say, I was quite pleased with the solution oriented. They got a lot of people in the room and they said, look, we don't want to keep complaining about what is. Let's look for the solutions about what can be. And so I do want to recognize that. Now, the role of the examiner is manufacturing focused, but what is needed in the country is earning foreign exchange, as we can tell, with 80% of our foreign exchange coming from the energy sector and so on. And now that prices are low and volumes, I know Kevin will go into that as well. We are a little bit challenged. And so we have to look at what you call more efficient resource allocation, exactly as Roger had mentioned. And so some of the questions I'm hoping that we will get to throughout this conversation is, why are we not exporting more, right? The key question is, who needs to do what? I think Roger's kind of convened a nice group here of people who have some roles in the different aspects. Then coming to the last two things that Roger said, what are the best opportunities for export? And what are our comparative advantages? I mean, Roger and myself had some long conversations on this topic. And he is right in terms of being able to target and actually, what you say, do the efficient resource allocation. It should be based on empirical data and it should be based on some scientific rigor. I think that will increase the chances. However, it will also be required that the stakeholders and the players have the ambition and the aspiration to achieve what is set out. You can't just expect, what they say, you could carry the horse to the water, but you can't make the horse drink. So that is what is on the table here. And then the part that I'm going to focus a little bit more on here is, what can we do to be more competitive? And I'll say straight off the bank, what the Exim Bank is attempting to do. And we have a specific space that we are operating in, but we are attempting to do this more efficient resource allocation, specifically with foreign exchange. And the idea is that we are going to try to facilitate exporters by removing constraints. And one constraint in our current environment is foreign exchange. And we are trying to remove constraints. And again, I see Franco reacting, and we are doing a lot of work together to be able to do that. The services piece, there's great opportunity there. And in fact, in the countries we have developing, more developed economies, services end up being a larger portion of your economy. And I know we already have some big service exporters in the financial sector and so on, and specific comparative advantages in different areas, architectural firms and all these different type of things. So I just want to list 3 essential strategies. I'm going to go back to my lecturer days when I was still lecturing, but I'll go into some of the 5 essential strategies for competitiveness. Now, this is at the micro level. Raja, this is you are the macro level there. This is the micro level, so company level strategies, right? And one is to focus on core competencies. You know, if you're good at and you have a comparative advantage in something, you continue to do it and you will have economies of scale and so on. 2, people make a difference, attract and retain necessary talent. 3, become more customer centric. And here's the 2 that I would like to drill down on during this conversation as well is drive down cost is one. We all know that you're more competitive if you drive down costs. And the 5th is expand internationally, right? And there are a number of different ways to expand internationally. I'm not going to go into details on them. You could just do directing, exporting, licensing, franchising, partnering, joint ventures. You know, you buy a company. Some of our local companies have done that. Piggybacking. I just want to stick a pin on piggybacking. Piggybacking is where companies are going to be able to collaborate with each other. And we want more of that. So for example, a large company that already has distribution networks can help a smaller company that doesn't have, but has complementary products to that large company. And it could piggyback on the distribution networks to get to those international markets. And there's a number of other ways that we could look at that thing, but piggybacking and collaboration between companies will also help reduce costs as well. I'm going to talk a little bit more after as we get into the question and answer period and so on. But I want to plant a seed and I want to commend our local companies for becoming financially astute in a specific way. You know, when you have an issue or a challenge, you have to develop to deal with that challenge. And one term that, Roger, I want to kind of term today at this forum is the term dual currency management. Our companies have been forced to be able to implement dual currency management. They can't just have one payables or one cash flow. They have larger local revenues, TT dollar revenues, and smaller US dollar revenues. But yet your US dollar expenses are significant. And then you have your TT dollar expenses as well. So there's a gap. And that gap is that constraint that I talked about. And we will talk more how we can help deal with that gap so that we can help you, manage some of those strained credit relationships and so on with your suppliers and so on. So that is just the forward there. And I'm very pleased to be here and I'm happy to hear how the conversation goes.
Thank you very much for your contribution, Mr. Ducran. Next, I'd like to invite Ms. Franca Costello. Ms. Costello, to make a contribution.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you to Roger and Rebecca for putting this together and to UE, the Trade Development Unit. Thank you, Christian Seeley, to the fellow panelists, Mr. Ducran for being in attendance tonight, and all of our viewers. I do have a PowerPoint prepared, so please bear with me while I do the share for that. So. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. Okay, so thank you for having me represent the manufacturing industry. And as Navin said, we are working towards an export strategic plan. The topic that we are exploring here at this webinar, global competitiveness, is essential if we are going to stabilize, secure, and grow the Trinidad and Tobago economy. 2020 has really been a watershed year, and not just here, but around the world. The effects of coronavirus have been felt throughout the supply chain, and in a region like ours, already vulnerable to the vicissitudes of international markets, we have to be prepared for the inevitable economic fallout. Raw material supplies are already being disrupted, and worker productivity and output were severely stymied. Regionally, tourism and entertainment is taking a hit with restrictions on gathering and travel And this will have a direct impact on imports and exports, with negative effects on our manufacturing exporters to CARICOM. Manufacturers already under pressure now have a new challenge to adapt to and overcome. In response, technology is reshaping the workplace, as it is for us tonight. But in every situation, there are opportunities. And certainly, rethinking workspaces can provide creative and cost-efficient solutions that we never previously contemplated. And this is where we are going to pivot to recognize that global competitiveness is about using the natural resources that we have in the most productive way possible. Geography and local natural resource endowments clearly play a role in determining a country's potential position in the global value chain, and thus its potential to build on its comparative advantages. And so today, we are seeing a reevaluation of the ratio of output against expenses, because it has become essential to do more with less. So let us first examine our current status and then move to understanding TTMA's manufacturing export plan, which is our roadmap for increasing competitiveness and thus improving exports. The manufacturing industry employs 52,300 workers, just under 10% of the workforce. Of the 1,014 manufacturers, 124 of the large manufacturers employ 86% of the manufacturing workforce. However, mighty are the small, because the SMEs account for 87% of the businesses in TNT. And these SMEs are our future industry leaders. The manufacturing industry's GDP contribution is 30 billion, the second biggest contributor to GDP at around 19%. The TTMA launched its manufacturing export strategy in June this year with a formidable goal to double 2018 export figures of 3.6 billion by 2025 to 7 billion. The where, who, and how TTMA is going to double that export number is most pertinent to this discussion. And right away, we recognize our main contributors as the large companies, so much so that we've identified the top 20 manufacturers to make up 80% of the non-energy export bill. And this is where TTMA comes in, to work with our 536 members to collaborate with the government to expand their export potential through agencies like Exim Bank, Export TT, UE, MIC, Invest TT, and others. Exports from the non-energy manufacturing sector have been decreasing steadily, falling by 43% from 5.8 billion in 2014 to 3.6 in 2018. And it is because of this trend and impending problems that come from the fallout in export that the TTMA recognize a need to focus in and address the rooted problems. Who are our clients? What are the market potentials, and who are we competing with? These are the questions that drive a business person, and the same approach was used when addressing the increase in exports. The data points us to these top countries, and mapping market potential, as Mr. Hussain was saying, against our product capacity is critical for success. It was not surprising to learn that two of Trinidad and Tobago's top exports is what we are well known for, and that is our food and our spirits. And it makes up 1.6 billion of our export bill. The paper industry is 500 million, and minerals, being cement mostly, is 226 million. Now, if we look at these top 5 industries and the top 10 countries, which are heavily weighted in the CARICOM, clearly we rely on the buoyancy of our brother and sister CARICOM countries, who in turn rely heavily on tourism. The entertainment industry is as essential to manufacturing as manufacturing is to economic diversification in Trinidad and Tobago. The linkages of all of the economies are real and the ecosystem is tender. So we must forge ahead with our vision to stabilize, strengthen, and secure our manufacturing industry. It is imperative to do so to protect our 52,300 jobs and to create alternatives to non-oil and gas revenues as the energy outlook remains unfavorable and while employment figures in oil and gas remains at just 5%. Diversification of our revenue to balance manufacturing with oil and gas is essential for the country to stabilize. The priority must be on manufacturing. Thematically, we will leverage 5 things to make this happen. Work with the top 20 manufacturers to double non-energy manufacturing, work with government to increase reach in CARICOM, work with domestic entrepreneurs and SMEs to sustainably increase the quantity and quality of the raw materials supply, increase competitive advantage through better skills and productivity, and partner with the government to fix trade facilitation issues. While the strategy designates the private sector as the influencer, it also recognizes components that the government must lead and influence. We have reviewed the government strategy for the sector and are pleased to see that we are aligned. And it is for this reason that earlier this year, TTMA's strategy was endorsed by the Ministry of Trade and Industry and appended to its manufacturing policy. We have devised 7 strategic pillars that are instrumental to our growth and expansion agenda. Of course, there's a lot of detail that's within these strategies, but they are advocacy, demand, supply, infrastructure, labor, technology or innovation, and capital. Trinidad and Tobago has several competitive advantages that should make the manufacturing sector an economic juggernaut. We have relatively cheap utility rates, highly educated and skilled labor force, access to markets, and well-made, high-quality products that can compete with established brands anywhere in the world. But these advantages are too often superseded by infrastructural policy or technological hindrances that can make it difficult to do business efficiently. The strategic pillars are designed to do 2 things: improve the ease of doing business and reduce the cost of doing business. We are essentially becoming more productive to be more competitive globally. The 12 items listed here on the screen are all accounted for in TTMA's strategic export plan. To know how to get where we want to go, we have to first know where we are. And right now, we are ranked 79 on the Global Competitive Index, a downward trend from 2018, yes, but still an improvement on 2017, which was 83. The point is not to let the trend be solidified in 2020 and to start reversing it if it so has to be. TT's ease of doing business ranking deteriorated from 102 in 2018 to 105 in 2019. These trends must be reversed. Phase 1 of TTMA's strategic plan is to stabilize the domestic market. 2020 has been an incredibly difficult year, and we have to focus on stabilizing our manufacturing base. In phase 2 of the strategy implementation, we are looking at strengthening the base. We'll recapture and recover our pre-COVID export market share through a virtual reconnect. In phase 3, we will focus our attention on growing exports by targeting and securing new markets and connecting our members through B2B arrangements. And as you can see, other than the broad statements I'm making here, there's a lot of detail that goes into each of these sections, with KPIs built out with different facilities and key stakeholders that we've been meeting with, holding them to targets. Navin knows this very well with Exim Bank and the goals that we give him as well. So the big question on everyone's mind is, what is the business community can hope for coming out of this budget? And in a broad context, we're hoping for liquidity, elimination of bureaucracy, removal of obstacles to the ease of doing business, affordable land spaces and infrastructure, as Mr. Hussain spoke about e-tech parks, labor law reform, and access to foreign markets. And of course, we have very specific recommendations that were made. The 2025 vision to increase exports will strengthen domestic capacity, assure sustainability, and create the right environment to grow exports and grow revenue. These are formidable goals. We recognize the task at hand. We appreciate that it can be seen as, big goals and difficult tasks ahead, but we do believe in that each step in the right direction and having a strategic plan that maps it out with goals set against dates and stakeholders and owners of those KPIs is the start to getting the momentum going. And we believe that it being driven by private sector is key to make this strategy happen. The strategy will change as new influences come into our spaces, and we have occurrences such as COVID-19, which we could have never predicted happening. When this plan was formulated, it was at the end of 2019, it was ready, and we held back because of Christmas celebrations till now. We held back because of carnival celebrations. COVID-19 has taught us anything at the TTMA is that do not procrastinate. Make the adjustments and pivot as quickly as possible, because you will get left behind. So I look forward to the questions in regards to our export strategy.
Thank you very much for your contribution, Ms. Costello. Next, we'd like to invite Ms. Nirmala Devi Singh Prasad to give her contribution. Ms. Devi Singh Prasad.
Hello, good night. Good night to all. Thank you to Trade and Economic Development Unit of the Department of Economics at UWI. I'm very honored to be a part of this presentation and more honored to be in the presence of such esteemed presenters. I will, at this point, attempt this share screen activity, so kindly bear with me. Can everyone see what's being shared?
Yes, we can see it.
Great. So this is a presentation that I am making on behalf of NAMDEVCO in my capacity as CEO of NAMDEVCO. And like our previous presenter, Ms. Costello, I am also attempting to introduce and let you all know about our strategic plans that would have been written earlier this year with respect to increasing the external competitiveness of agriculture in Trinidad and Tobago. I'd like to introduce my strategic competitive points by letting you know who NAMDEVCO is and what we are about. NAMDEVCO is known for its post-harvest handling facilities, one of which is located in Piarco, and it's our most active facility with respect to post-harvest handling. We are known for 9 farmers markets throughout Trinidad, soon to be 12, inclusive of Tobago. We are known for 6 wholesale and retail markets operating Sunday to Sunday in some instances. We do facilitate a significant amount of market facilitation through many various platforms, inclusive of data dissemination. We are known for our quality assurance and farm certification program, a program that was brought about based on a Barbados trade protocol since approximately 1991 to enhance trade between Trinidad and Barbados, and the program has been recognized regionally by other importing countries. NAMIS, our database that provides real information on a daily basis of what happens with respect to price and volume traded at all of our markets, inclusive of the wholesale fish markets, and our technology features inclusive of SMS, a buyers and sellers forum that's both virtual and physical, and our AgriPrice app, where decision makers who require information on price and volume are able to get information at the touch of a button or via a telephone call. Our vision is to lead Trinidad and Tobago in agricultural marketing and agribusiness solutions that will contribute to the social development and well-being of our stakeholders. Our strategic mission for 2019-2021, as identified in our plan, is to offer agribusiness and marketing solutions to increase competitiveness of Trinidad and Tobago's foods to the world. And just how do we plan to do this? We plan to use three main pillars to do this. We plan to use the policy approach. We plan to introduce a lot more ICTs into agricultural marketing, both locally, regionally, and internationally, but more so based on recent changes in the way food is traded. We recognize that there are many international food safety regulations that determine what is shipped, how it is shipped, and when it is shipped, and the it in this case being food, which ultimately affects the global marketing of food, not just from an import point of view, but an export point of view. And so we are in the process of preparing many programs that we hope to be harmonized with other international programs to have the foods that are grown here in Trinidad and Tobago recognized and accepted into international markets. These are some of the drivers of change that have impacted on what NAMDEVCO's strategic focus is for the period 2019 to 2021. And I'd just like to reiterate, it says it includes global import regulations, as we just spoke about, and we'll speak about it a little more. Local demands for safe food from all of our institutional buyers, our restaurants and hotel associations, and even our consumers at the supermarket and mini-mart levels. The need for food safety, the introduction of the food safety policy that was cabinet approved as of December 2019, the rising food import bill, and the need for us to be more self-sufficient, to feed our people, to be more food secure. Coincidentally, the increase in the incidence of non-communicable diseases, which, as we know, non-communicable diseases playing a significant impact in the recovery rate of persons affected by the COVID-19 virus, and food and nutrition and food security demands throughout the world, inclusive of right here in our Trinidad and Tobago. Our first competitiveness strategy, many of you all may have heard the acronym Global Gap, Europe Gap, Asia Gap, China Gap. We are in the process of developing a national good agricultural practices certification program that's going to guide and going to provide that level of assurance for the safety of the foods coming out of our farms. This national certification program is going to be coupled with a model farm program, and it is hoped, not hoped, it will be in the very near future harmonized with international food safety standards so that it provides market access for our foods grown in Trinidad and Tobago into our competitive markets, inclusive of the European markets. We recognize that there is a need based on the organoleptic qualities of our foods, based on the ethnic demands for persons who live abroad, and for growing market needs based on the ability of chefs to create new menu applications to service their clients. We recognize that some of the foods that are grown right here in Trinidad and Tobago, and I will call some of them by name, they include our scorpion peppers. They include our shadow benny, which is known as cilantro, but it's by no means given justice being called cilantro. And even our melangins that are grown right here that cannot be grown with the same taste or quality profiles that we grow here. Another thing is our simple dashing bush leaves that are grown in very few other parts of the world. They are grown in Hawaii and Samoa Islands. However, the quality of our dashing leaves, our ability to ship it into the US and Europe based on the agronomic practices creates an opportunity not only for the fresh product, but for value-added products. And it is with these basic commodities in mind that NAMDEVCO, in collaboration with AICA and other key players, are on a mission to develop and implement the National GAP certification program for farms in Trinidad and Tobago. As I reiterated, these are some of the international food safety regulations that can act as barriers if they are not followed as per the important country requirements. We have examples of food safety regulations that affect trade from countries such as Canada, the United States, and Europe, where, as previous speakers would have identified, the populations are large, and so it offers themselves the opportunity for large marketing opportunities. Increasing the availability of production and marketing data. We recognize and understand that marketing data is needed on a daily basis. It's needed on a real-time basis for informed decision-making for decision makers in an attempt to make long-term investments into the agriculture sector. But it is also needed to stimulate research and development into value-added products, post-harvest technologies, inclusive of the design and availability of equipment to reduce food waste and food loss. We all know in the agriculture sector that the marketing of fresh agricultural produce has significant limitations in the shelf life of the commodity. There are only so many conditions that we can alter to extend the shelf life of food, but ultimately the value of agricultural marketing lies in value-added production and proper post-harvest handling. It is the intention of NAMDEVCO to utilize what we call disruptive technologies, technologies that can provide a core amount of information that would probably replace information that was normally collected manually by human assets. So it allows the opportunity for more information to be more available quite widely, inclusive of we have written and developed programs that are looking at utilizing satellite technology, remote sensing, and drone technology in an attempt to improve what is happening on the field. These are projects that are conceptualized and based on funding. We are going to move these projects into the pilot phase. We know that worldwide, some of these projects are feasible and they have been successful. And so in developing our GAP certification program, it is imperative that we are able to provide more up-to-date and real-time information on the crops that are being grown in an attempt to market agricultural commodities. Our competitiveness goal strategy number 3 is something that we lack significantly in the markets of Trinidad and Tobago, and that is the implementation of standardized grades and standards program. Many times we attend, we go to the supermarkets, we go to markets, we go to roadside stalls, and the produce are attempted to be graded, but that attempt to grade does not allow us into international markets. It reduces our competitiveness significantly. Some level of grading is done at the packing house. However, the programs need to be standardized and recognized by international buyers so that we can improve the marketing and competitiveness of these foods. Another important program is branding. We've not done the least bit of justice to branding. Branding foods in terms of their organoleptic qualities, or branding them in terms of patenting our local varieties. We do grow a significant amount of land race varieties of unique food items that will create a niche market, and if marketed properly, can create wider markets in the global world. However, it is important that we develop that patenting ability of our entrepreneurs, of our farmers, to be able to increase the competitiveness of the foods that we grow. Value chain support, it's absolutely necessary that the value chain support is provided by institutions in an attempt to reduce the cost of production. We recognize that many times the cost of produce coming out of our farms is equivalent to the landing price of produce in the international markets. A typical case, for example, is the cost of production of our hot peppers right now. Right now, they are not competitive at the Miami terminal markets for obvious reasons. We need to improve, and of course, our inputs, for example, simply the varieties that we use to provide higher yields, the availability and the price of packaging that for agricultural commodities. As basic as these support measures are needed to improve external competitiveness of our local commodities and to help to make them more competitive in the international market. Many of you all who are listening would also know that we do have significant challenges in air and sea carriers for our fresh produce into international markets, while value added allows it to be transshipped and shipped at various times and under various conditions, and sometimes without the need for proper temperature and humidity control of fresh produce based on a market that demands fresh and convenient foods. We do face significant challenges with respect to the price of shipping and the availability of shipping carriers. And our last competitiveness goal is, as we see, the establishment of public-private partnerships in Trinidad and Tobago. It is a model that is currently being explored by NAMDEVCO, driven by its board of directors, and it is based on our research. It is proving to be very useful in developing and increasing the competitiveness of our foods to the world. And with this, I would just like to take a moment to let you all know these are where our farmers markets are located. Our farmers markets provide a wonderful opportunity to determine and to see firsthand the ability of our producers in Trinidad and Tobago and our value-added processors to take our foods to the world. As identified, there are some limitations in them doing so, inclusive of their ability to meet the international food safety regulations. But these are where the support measures are located, are required, but our farmers markets provide a showcase to the world of what Trinidad and Tobago is capable of doing with respect to marketing its agriculture. And with this slide, I say thank you, and I look forward to the question and answer segment.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Ms. Devi Singh Prasad. Next, I would like to invite Ms. Vashti Gayadeen to give her contribution. Ms. Gayadeen.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Roger, for inviting me to be part of this esteemed panel. Could you all see my screen?
Not just yes, Miss Guiding.
Let me try again.
Okay, we're saying it now.
What am I doing wrong?
Oh, there's an icon at the bottom right corner to the immediate left. Yes, the bottom right corner to the immediate left of the negative sign. If you move to your left, not that one. Yeah, okay. That one. That's the one, yeah, great.
Good evening, everybody again. For those of you all who don't know, the Trinidad and Tobago Coalition of Services Industries has been in existence since 2006. We are the umbrella body for services associations in the country. Currently, we represent 56 associations with a combined membership of 656,000 businesses and persons, ranging from financial services to tourism services to health and healthcare providers to architects. So I'll just provide you all with what's happening in the industry. Services today comprise the largest sector in Trinidad and Tobago, contributing approximately 60% to GDP over the period 2011 to 2018. Therefore, bleak findings from the TTCSI COVID-19 Economic Impact Assessment Study undertaken in May 2020 are a cause for great concern, with 55% of services companies terminating full-time employees during the stay-at-home order period, and more than 60% indicated that they would require urgent financing if their operations were restricted for 3 months. It is evident that COVID-19 has caused severe disruptions in the local economy. Service industries which were hardest hit are event planners, tour operators, the creative and cultural sector, contractors, architects, engineers, massage therapists, barbers, nail techs, and hoteliers. I am now going to give you some insights of the National Services Exporters Survey. This was a study that was undertaken last year. The survey was actually completed this year over the period of January to April of this year. The contracting firm was the Arthur Luckjack Global School of Business. The full results of this survey will be revealed next week, Wednesday. So I'm just going to share a snapshot. The main findings demonstrated that over the period 2017 to 2018, other, energy, and ICT were the highest earning sectors. But fashion, tourism, creative industries, and business and professional services were the only sectors that were reported growth from 2017 onwards. With respect to export activity, the services sector had a multiplier effect in its ability to attract diverse markets. Key export markets for local services exporters were the United States of America, Barbados, and Guyana. The main modes of supply were Mode 1. Mode 1 refers to cross-border trade, and Mode 4, movement of natural persons. The local services sector also contributed to a high share of GDP. The highest level of GDP came from sectors, as I stated before, identified as other, ICT, and fashion. However, it's important to know that the highest dollar value came from ICT and energy services. Backward international linkages also exist between local service exporters, as they had a large pool of their suppliers located in North America and within Trinidad and Tobago. There was a synergistic relationship between exporters and their partners, for instance, customers and suppliers. However, and this is a critical point, this was not the case for exporters and their supporting institutions. This is something that we will advocate for going forward. Now let's look at some of the export barriers. The main challenges identified for exporters and potential exporters were access to international markets, and more so market intelligence and access to finances. Potential exporters indicated that they face many obstacles, namely lack of awareness of how to utilize trade agreements, regulatory frameworks, barriers, as well as generally just a basic lack of know-how on how to export, how to enter these markets. What the TTCSI has been doing over the last 3 months is building economic sectorial profiles. So one of these profiles as indicators is business and professional services. We have mapped out, there are roughly 1,600 firms operating in this space, and there's a projected growth rate. The growth rate in this sector in 2018 was 12%, and we identified global trends. It is a US $2 trillion market in the US, 823 million market in Canada. As well as we have mapped out the financial and insurance services sector. And more importantly, one of the underlying issues is from this survey was institutional support. Most of these 125 persons were surveyed, and roughly 85% of those surveyed indicating that the institutions that they went to were not able to support them. In these institutions operated in silos. They did not provide them with market intelligence. There was no clear directions. And of course, what everybody spoke about, the lack of doing business. So going forward, what we'd like to see is a realignment of these institutions that support. We need to rethink how these institutions support services and export, specifically export-led growth. And that's my presentation.
Thank you very much for your contribution, Ms. Gayadine. Next, and last but not least, we have Mr. Kevin Ramnarine to give his contribution. Good evening, Mr. Ramnarine.
Good night, Mr. Seeley, and good night to our listeners and panelists. Tonight, I'll focus a bit on the energy sector, and I will sort of link that to what's happening with the wider economy. Before I start off, I told Roger I was going to start with a quotation from V.S. Naipaul. It's always useful to start with a quotation from Naipaul, seeing that this is a conversation we're having here on competitiveness. And in the middle passage, Naipaul wrote that again and again, one comes back to the main degrading fact of the colonial society. It never required efficiency. It never required quality. And these things, because unrequired, became undesirable. That's in the middle passage by V.S. Naipaul. Forgive him, he wrote that in the 1960s, but I don't think much has changed since the 1960s. So where are we today? Well, not in a very good place. I'll start off my talk, and I'll try to be as brief as possible. And I'll focus on really on 5 areas. The first is production. The second one is prices. The third one is low carbon companies. 4 would be deepwater exploration, and 5 would be what do we do to improve things and move forward. With regard to production, the basis of this economy is the production of natural gas and secondarily the production of oil. The production of natural gas in the year 2015 was 3.8 billion cubic feet of gas per day, 3.83 if you want to be specific. In 2015, the production of natural gas today for the first 7 months of this year averages 3.35. That's a decline of 12.5%. The production of oil in 2015 was 78,700 barrels of oil per day. Today, it stands at 56,800 barrels of oil, or 28% decline. So in both oil and natural gas, we have had significant declines in output in the last 5 years, and this is a fact. With regard to that's production, and of course the production of natural gas also impacts the production of ammonia, methanol, and liquefied natural gas, all very important exports of Trinidad and Tobago. We could talk a bit more about Point Lisas later on in the Q&A. With regard to prices, oil prices are currently around $40 US a barrel. Wood Mackenzie, which is pretty reputable outfit from the US, they are forecasting an oil price of $52 US a barrel for Brent for 2021. So not much difference, but a recovery in oil prices, largely because demand for oil is expected to recover in 2021, but not get back to where it was in 2019 pre-COVID. Just touching a bit again on price, and this comes back to the Point Lisa story. Ammonia prices are currently $172 US a ton, and that is what they call free on board FOB Caribbean. And that is one of the reasons why our ammonia industry is being severely impacted. And there are so many plant closures. The most recent this week being the Nutrien, I think it's Nutrien 03 plant was closed this week indefinitely. And there's a difference between a plant being closed indefinitely and a plant being idled. So that's the price situation. Natural gas prices also low all over the world. Oil prices continue to be low. Ammonia and methanol prices are low. With regard to this low carbon, what I call low carbon companies, and I specify the word companies, for many years, since going back to the days of even when I was in high school, we've been hearing about climate change and global warming and so on. But now we are seeing where serious action is being taken by the two major companies that make up our energy sector here in Trinidad, BP and Shell. So BP and Shell have both made commitments to their shareholders that by the year 2050, they will be net zero carbon emitters. BP has been more bullish than most companies, even more bullish than Shell, and they have come out with some specific targets. And this is as recent as, I think, last month. BP has announced that they plan to reduce hydrocarbon production, oil and gas, by 40% by 2030. Will that impact us? Well, we don't know for sure. Secondly, BP has said it's going to increase its capital expenditure on renewable energy projects from $0.5 billion US per annum to $5 billion US per annum. So that means that oil and gas projects are going to have to compete now with renewable energy projects for that scarce capital expenditure dollar. So it's going to be more difficult to attract investment capital into Trinidad for traditional natural gas projects. So that low carbon strategy is going to be impacting the way these two companies do business. Incidentally, one of the biggest emitters of CO2 in the country, carbon dioxide in the country, is the Atlantic LNG facility in Point Fortin, which is mainly owned by these two companies, BP and Shell. So I expect to see a lot of change in the next 10 years with how these two companies behave and invest in Trinidad and Tobago. And what does that mean for our country? Well, that's open to discussion. The fourth thing I wanted to talk about is deep water exploration. There was a press conference, it was I think 2 weeks ago or last week. There was a press conference held by the Prime Minister where an update was given with regard to the progress that is being made by BHP Billiton in exploring our deep water. That exploration program actually started in February 2014 with the 3D seismic, and it was predated with the award of production sharing contracts or licenses. That has, according to the results thus far, has discovered between 5 to 6.5 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, which is a significant amount of gas. And of course, the press conference was called to discuss the drilling of a well called Broadside. Most people thought it was, the press conference was being called to announce a discovery in the Broadside well, but it was a bit anticlimactic. And the press conference was really called to discuss, to say, hey, we're drilling this important well, and we have great hope that this well could be, a big discovery. So deep water is clearly the future of the hydrocarbon industry in Trinidad. The challenge, of course, being the cost of production. It's very expensive to produce a unit of natural gas in water depths greater than 1,000 meters. And finally, I just wanted to talk about some of the things. So the picture that's just been painted there is, the production is pretty gloomy. I expect production to natural gas production, it's averaging 3.3 billion cubic feet per day in this year. I expect it to fall to 2.9 next year, which is a number that I'm sure Roger would be very horrified by. 2.9. If you've tracked natural gas production numbers, you know that is a scary number. But I expect natural gas production to increase in 2022 because there are about 4 significant projects that will come into production. So I don't really see this economy seeing any light at the end of the tunnel until 2022 because of those natural gas projects. So that's, in terms of the way forward, what should we do, or what, people will always ask, well, what will you do? But the first thing is that to increase production, you have to award acreage. And the Ministry of Energy has not awarded new acreage since December 2014, which is actually when, according to my records, which is actually when that block in which Broadside is being drilled was awarded. So if you look at that, BHP was awarded that block in December 2014, and we are now in September 2020. So it took them almost 6 years to get to that point, So the first thing is that we need to aggressively award acreage. The second thing is that clearly our fiscal regime is not working to the extent that it's attracting the investment that we need to increase production. So we need a revised fiscal regime for a low price environment. The government had been hearing the cries of the Energy Chamber and other stakeholders, including myself, since 2016 about supplemental petroleum tax. It was mentioned in the PNM manifesto that they would make changes to the SPT, and I expect that to happen on the 5th of October. If that happens, that's a good thing especially for our small lease operator, farm-out type companies operating in South Trinidad. The third thing is fix the ease of doing business. And we keep saying this, but it's important that we say it over and over again. The ease of doing business in the energy sector is probably worse than it is in the wider economy, given the amount of regulations that you require to do activity in this sector. And finally, the fourth thing, I would review the role of the National Gas Company. It's now becoming very obvious that the NGC model, which is now 45 years old, 1975, the NGC model probably, it's time to review that model where the NGC is the merchant, buying gas from the upstream companies and selling to the plants in Point Lisas and to TNTech. And I'll close off with a fifth point, given that the budget is not far away. We have a serious problem in Trinidad, which I don't think is known widely, but we have a situation where the National Gas Company subsidizes TNTech. And that's not because TNTech is a bad company. Actually, I think TNTech is a well-run company. in the context of state enterprises. But NGC subsidizes TNTEC's natural gas purchases, and that has caused a lot of problems for the National Gas Company. And there's also a problem between TNTEC and TGU. And TGU is our large power plant in La Brea. So this whole issue of electricity rates, and this whole issue of the NGC TNTEC relationship, where NGC has to subsidize TNTEC. In the days when the NGC was making $4, $5, $6 billion after tax profit, that probably wasn't, it wasn't showing up as it would be showing up now with the NGC making less than 400 million TT profit. So that is going to be an issue which has to be tackled at some point in time. It is simply an unsustainable relationship between the NGC, TNTEC and TGU. So I expect to hear something about that on the 5th of October. So I'll take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much for your contribution, Mr. Ramnarayan. First, I'd like to invite Mr. Robert Amar. He had a few questions in the chat, so I'd like to invite him to address the panel. Mr. Amar.
Very good evening to everyone. I thank all. I am very happy to hear Franca. First time I'm listening to her. I think she has put a very good spin on things. I don't know whether she'll be able to achieve the objective, but I wish her the best. I did put some notes in the column. Makes no sense going through them. It will take too long because there are a lot of things have to be considered with this export plan. If we do not factor into that raw materials that are available domestically or products that can be converted into value added for appreciative income as outlined by NAMDEFCO and the others. The issue still is around this economy that is driven by petrochemicals. I listen to Kevin and I hear what he's saying. So I have two questions for him. One, we have plant and machinery in Trinidad. So what is the price point that will make people who have invested their money in these plants stay here to convert the natural gas into finished product that will make it commercially viable for both parties? And what do you think has to be done in order to keep them here? Because whether we like it or not, we may be able to move the economy slightly in the other areas, but we'll have to still focus on petrochemicals with a plan of taking those values or profits out of the petrochemical sector and plowing it now into those areas that have been referred to as specialized. And I like the Adam Smith situation, but are we serious about that in Trinidad and Tobago? And then on the final note, I just wanted to say that while I like the quotation from our laureate, unfortunately, that isn't, Kevin. That's not feasible today. It might be a good point for people to become aware of a thinking then. But if we look at the colonial masters, they have gone past, They're no longer dealing in historical or all of these areas of yesteryear. And I get serious. And this means to say that Trinidad and Tobago have to have a plan, because I don't think we have the goals set out. I don't think we have the timelines put down, and we definitely don't have what I would call the products to engage in meaningful earnings, which now will have to answer the question by the Exim Bank, which is how much of that US foreign exchange money that has been given out to facilitate these export-led companies, how much have they returned? How much is still outstanding? Data is important. And we're trying to make decisions without having prerequisite data. That's it for me for now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Amar. And Mr. Ramnarayan, would you like to address those questions right now?
Well, the one question I recall was the question about the price point and point listas, right?
Yeah.
So clearly something is wrong at Point Lisas. And saying that it is a result of COVID-19 and COVID-19 induced low ammonia and methanol prices is trying to wish it away. There is a deeper problem at Point Lisas that goes beyond the price that these companies get for ammonia and methanol, and it's the cost of production. So, and the cost of production is directly related to the price these companies are paying for natural gas. I think everybody agrees with that, but I don't see the government talking about that side of the problem. So I've seen a number of newspaper clippings quoting Proman and quoting Nutrien, where they say that the problem is really twofold. It is the price, the low price on the world market, yes, but two, they're also paying a lot more for natural gas. And that is what we have to address. How do we, one, how do we produce more natural gas? And two, how do we produce it cheaply or less at a lower cost? So the price that is required to keep companies in Point Lisas and to keep them going is certainly not the price they're paying now because they're closing down. So that price, Robert, has to be reduced. And I am told that the NGC is in active dialogue with their suppliers about reducing those prices. So I don't know where that is, but it is clear that whatever they're paying right now, whatever the NGC is selling to them, it is not keeping them economically viable. And that brings into question the whole issue of the role of the NGC. So the NGC, as you know, adds a margin in the middle. They buy from BP, Shell, BHP, and EOG, and they add a margin and they add something for the use of their pipeline network, and then they sell to Point Lisas. There have been different schools of thought about that business model. Some people have advocated for the NGC to not be in the middle of the value chain anymore, and for the NGC to simply be a transmission company operating a pipeline network. And so there's that debate going on. And that was one of the points I raised, review the role of the NGC, because maybe what worked 45 years ago, 35 years ago, no longer applies in a mature natural gas market. I mean, so I think that is something which there's no black and white answer for. But certainly the price that the plants in the estate are currently paying for natural gas does not cause them to be economically viable. And for example, the average cost to produce a ton of ammonia in Trinidad, I did a little check on this, and it costs about, on average, $175 US to produce a ton of ammonia in Trinidad, on average. It would vary according to plant. The price of ammonia right now is $172 US a ton. Now, there will be some plants that are producing it at 150 or maybe one, and they may stay alive, but those plants which have a break even which is higher than 175 would be the ones that would be closing down. So that is, so the solution to the problem really is to lower the cost, the price that these plants pay for natural gas, and that requires, the short-term solution is NGC speaking to its suppliers and asking them to reduce their price. And the longer-term solution really is to look at this NGC business model and question really how should it look going forward. Was there a second question?
Yeah, maybe I'll just jump in quickly about the Exim Bank. I know, thanks for the question. And I will say that you want data and metrics, and I believe that is extremely important in decision making. And so just to share some with the audience, about late last year, we did a compilation of totaled up basically the export sales for the client base of the Exim Bank. And this is late 2019. And at that time, we were supporting companies with total export sales of about over $650 million. Since then, we've also accelerated the velocity in terms of how much foreign exchange is going into growth-oriented companies. And that is the key here, is you put your investments into growth-oriented companies, not just consumption-based. Now, when we've done that, we have now about 70 clients out of a total universe of about 300 ongoing manufacturers in the country. And after you total up the export sales of that 70 clients, at the time when it was 650 late last year, we set a goal of trying to support $1 billion in export sales. Well, we are now at, about 2 months ago, we were at 950 million. We are now at 1.1 billion clients that have export sales. And so I say a lot of it is not that the exports are growing completely because we had a little downtime, but our client base has significantly grown. And again, is with the TTMA engaging their membership to bring in that type of thing. One thing I want to say as well is that targets are very important. And I heard the presentations, all presentations were good. Something I advise the TTMA on as well is that we need to drill down these sector-based targets down to the ground. And individuals and companies need to know what their individual targets are. And in fact, I would say for companies these days, you should set your own target. Next month, you want to get 1 or 2 more export clients, but in 1 year's time, you want to increase and take on an additional shift. Right now, our manufacturers are operating at about 70% capacity. There's room, but if you bring on more shifts, your cost base is going to go down and you're going to be more competitive. So for every goal that you have, the sectors as well as the companies, you need to put the metrics and the targets to do it. And that's what we do in the Exim Bank, and we're working with the growth-oriented companies to continue.
And Navin, I want to add, because I think that one of the best pieces of data that you've offered back is that in tracking the 69 companies that have purchased FX out of Exim Bank, Navin has tracked that from 2018 to date, those companies' export have grown cumulatively 15%. And so it shows that by making FX available and prioritizing it to manufacturers who have either an intent or already are exporting, that it has the potential to increase that export. And these are small growth numbers over a very short period of time. And like any snowball, as it gathers more momentum, it gravitates to bigger returns.
Okay, thank you very much for your contributions, Mr. Ducran and Ms. Costello. I have a question here for Ms. Costello from Mr. Nicholas Khan. Mr. Khan?
Hi, good night. Thank you for this webinar. It's very informative. Question, Digital 4.0 was mentioned as a major focus in the TTMA's presentation. I just wanted to find out, what are some of the main challenges faced by local businesses to integrate e-commerce into their business and facilitate competitiveness on the international market?
So first off, they're not even aware of the opportunities and the options that Digital 4.0 presents. Digital 4.0, as you sound like you would know, and most people in this group will know, but it's about system integration, streamlining processes in the most efficient way possible from beginning all the way through, where different departments are speaking to each other and data is constantly available. We've had the fortune of having De Novo do a lot of presentations to us, and their system is incredible. They're completely paperless. Everything is transactional online. And it's a machine. The whole company operates as a total machine. So the first challenge is informing people about the opportunities of what Digital 4.0 can do. And then making it not intimidating and making them recognize that it can be done in incremental modules that are affordable to their companies. So one of the things that we do right now, it's a paradigm shift in thinking, a complete shift. We judge a company right now and you say, how big is it? It's small, medium, large. The first thing we think is how many employees. That doesn't exist anymore. You can't judge a company based on the number of employees that are within it, because we've seen massive plants that are churning out millions on an annual basis, hundreds of millions, and having a workforce of 10 and 15, but they're operating 24/7. And that is because Digital 4.0 is making that type of efficiency and productivity available. We also have the vendors that can provide the software and the integration and the technical support right here in Trinidad. We have the automation experts that can come to your plant and give you advice on how to streamline this process to make it more efficient and how to value your products based on it as well. So biggest challenge right now is to give people the knowledge of what is available.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Costello.
Christian, if I may ask a question, please.
Oh, certainly.
Okay, so I wanted to ask Ms. Nirmala, what is the relationship between NAMDEFCO and ADB in terms of funding? Because you mentioned funding during your speech, and I wanted to raise that with you. And then for Vashti, this one is something that concerns me. Part of the problem in the Trinidad and Tobago economy is that the services sector, especially the non-essential, non-tradable services sector that the Prime Minister had to restrict transactions on during the middle of COVID, absorbs a proportion of the labor force that we cannot afford to be diverted into non-essential, non-tradable services. How are we planning to deal with that in terms of the strategic direction of the TTCSI? And then to Franca, I mean, I have to be careful how I ask things on the TTMA plan because I'm familiar with it. But one of the things that I want to raise for her is, and it really bothers me, Franca, that's why I'm raising it. So I see your targets and I see you all have done really well with the rollout and whatnot. And that's good. You all have drilled down some more. And that's excellent. And I like the way, I think by the drilling down, you will get good results. I saw your nominal target for improvement by 2025. And I think, listening to what Navin said, that also has a layered, structured approach and can happen, especially if it is we continue to focus on those firms that Navin mentioned are growth areas, which is obviously, that makes logical sense. But what I would like to ask is something related to the increase in nominal US dollar expectations, but that may go counter to some of the new digital for technology, and that's employment. I think if I were to be Minister of Trade, which will not happen, so you don't have to worry about that. But if I were to be Minister of Trade, I would have gone after doubling manufacturing employment from 50,000 to 150,000 or 200,000 within the 5-year period under my stint. Now, if we do that, everything that is involved in doing that will radically transform the structure of the economy, the export earning potential, and the sustainability of the economy. So all I'm asking, without making it complicated, is we have a good US dollar nominal target, and that's critical and important. But can you comment on the labor market side of that permutation a little? And then to Kevin Ramnarain, I noticed you mentioned the National Gas Company. But if I am reading correctly, the NEC has, as a subset of the National Gas Company, has been very unsuccessful in the last 5 years, for example. And what would you suggest, Kevin, in terms of reforming the NEC's role as a subsidiary of NGC in terms of its failure to attract any new export revenue earning plan? And I focus on export revenue in particular. So thank you for that opportunity, Christian.
Oh, you're most welcome. So, Nirmala, I believe you were first.
So Dr. Hossain, your question about ADB and the relationship with NAMDEFCO. NAMDEFCO being the marketing arm, ADB being the funding arm. We work very closely and collaboratively for the benefit of the farmer. Many times NAMDEFCO identifies and assists to facilitate market opportunities for farmers. In an attempt to sustain those market opportunities, funding is required. And so ADB recognizes the markets that are recommended by NAMDEVCO for the farmer. And there are instances where letters of request or comfort, as you may call it, are supplied to ADB to indicate to them that these farmers have embarked on particular markets for which funding is required to sustain those markets. And so it is that type of relationship, a market and a business opportunity to grow that market, that sort of synergistic relationship we have with the ADB. We also have the opportunity to share information with the ADB based on anomalies and trends we're seeing on the field, because we are in contact on a daily basis with some 3,000 farmers in Trinidad. We're able to provide that level of exchange of information where information is needed to better finance what's happening on the farm with respect to growing markets or sustaining markets.
Thank you very much, Ms. Devi Singh Prasad. Next, I believe, was Ms. Vashti Gayadeen. Ms. Gayadeen.
Hi, thanks. Roger, pertaining to your question, the two sectors that has been severely impacted would be personal care providers. They were out of commission for the early period. Now they are back to work. But the sector that has been dormant and out of commission is tourism services. We have been trying to assist these service providers in terms of thinking outside of the box. You would realize that a number of countries are offering virtual tours, but we are not doing those things. We are just simply trying at this point in time to get them into a survival mode, but we have not been able to achieve that. Just today, we were part of a strategic planning session with the Ministry of Tourism. And again, that tourism plan did not involve any proactive measures. So we will continue to lobby on behalf of these operators. But it calls for a level of out-of-the-box thinking, some type of innovation. You'll recall that TTCSI developed a cluster development plan for MICE tourism. We have been trying to see what events we could take virtual, but again, we have not been able to make any inroads.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Vashti Gayadeen. Next, I believe, was Ms. Franca Costello. Ms. Costello.
Just get unmute there. Okay.
Yep.
So Digital 4.0, when you talk about that, yes, the question about labor and how it impacts labor does it displace labor? It does tend to come up. Digital 4.0 is about emerging opportunities within industries, and it's about making systems more agile, more smart, reducing waste and collaborative working systems. It is articles and there are debates about it, Roger, you're right about that, because it's relatively new as well, somewhat new. But the debate is that it doesn't displace labor, but that it readjusts labor. And so it does a whole different type of training and an upskilling of labor and a creation of a new type of labor force that is emergent in advanced technology. So it's not a displacement, it's not a take your spot type, and so it's not going to reduce the labor requirement in manufacturing, but it reduces the waste, it reduces the type of resources that would have been manpower driven, but then it creates a technology drive where workspaces are collaborating with each other, but then that same labor becomes upskilled and they have mobility within the companies as well, and it increases the standard of living. And that's the intent of Digital 4.0. And I wanted to go back to Mr. Khan's question and answer, some of the challenges that we're seeing are that specifically are the type of platforms that are needed, the infrastructural support that is needed. It's no longer, brick and mortar when we're building these type of systems and these businesses. It's about e-commerce and having those e-commerce back ends and internet and cable and that type of data to be able to work properly. So I think we have some infrastructural needs that need to be developed into Trinidad. Capital needs to be able to refinance for this type of digital 4.0 implementation. You know, when COVID-19 hit, we saw a huge uptick in e-commerce platforms that went out, and that takes an investment to be able to build those online stores as well. So capital right now in Trinidad is needed to be able to do that adaptation for businesses to adjust. So I hope that answers your question a little bit more specifically.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Costello. Next, I believe you have Mr. Ramnarine.
Yeah, hi. So Roger asked a specific question about the role of National Energy. So that it used to be a company called National Energy Corporation, or NEC, and it was renamed about 6 years ago to National Energy. I don't know why. But their role is really multifold. And one of their roles is the conceptualization, promotion, development, and facilitation of new energy-based and downstream industries in Trinidad and Tobago. They also are into port development. They are also into operating tugs, towage, and harbor operations, and so on. So, but so in the last 10 years, and I think there was an article in The Guardian about the performance of the company. NEC, I still call them NEC. NEC is an arm of the NGC, but I don't think it's not well known that it's an arm of the NGC. So it's a subsidiary of the National Gas Company. The major achievement in the last 10 years has been actually the Mitsubishi plant, or the CGCL plant in La Brea, which is now operational. And I could tell you, because I was very close to that project and the development of that project. That project required a significant amount of political will to make it happen. It has happened. The first cargo of methanol will be picked up on Monday. To me, that's historic, a cargo of methanol leaving La Brea. So it's the first petrochemical plant outside of Point Lisas. It's really speaking to the industrialization of the Southwestern Peninsula, which was always the plan. But Roger's point is, why hasn't, so that's one project. What they really should have been doing is that they should have been seeking projects to go downstream of methanol, downstream of ammonia. And that largely hasn't happened in Trinidad. CLICO had some success with that, with something called the AUM complex. In 2010, the AUM plant, they went from ammonia to melamine. And when they reached the melamine, they said, okay, we will make this melamine, which is the building block for glue and particle boards and so on. We'll make this available to local manufacturers. Anybody who wants to buy, we'll sell it to them. And NEC was supposed to be pushing the idea of a plyboard factory or a particle board factory in La Brea. You remember the Prime Minister, the current Prime Minister had mentioned that, I think as far back as 2015. That hasn't happened. The Mitsubishi plant itself also has a downstream component, which is called dimethyl ether, which is part of the plant. But by and large, NEC has not been able to move Trinidad beyond methanol and ammonia. There have been, as I mentioned, some successes, but largely that hasn't happened. And I think it may have to do with one, I don't know if how important that is to the National Energy Corporation, or if their business is more focused on managing ports and industrial estates. Secondly, the whole issue of the entrepreneurial zeal or the entrepreneurial appetite for those type of projects. Maybe entrepreneurs, will seek lower risk projects and so on. So it is something which is of concern that we haven't been able to really penetrate beyond. And as I mentioned to Roger in a previous talk, there's a whole host of projects, a whole host of products that you could produce beyond methanol, like acetic acid and formaldehyde and so on, which all have linkages back into the manufacturing sector. So That has not happened, and that really should be what should have been happening in this economy for the last 30 or 40 years. Instead, what we do is primary processing of natural gas. So we just go from natural gas to ammonia, natural gas to methanol, and we export. As I said, we have had some limited success with AUM and DME and so on, but not where we ought to be.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Ramnarayan. So everybody, now I'm going to invite our panelists to give their closing contributions. We'd like to start with Ms. Nirmala Devi Singh Prasad. I have a question here that I would like you to address in your closing comments. From Cook Bajan. He asks, what is the current state of ETEC's Muruga agro-processing plant? And does NAMDEVCO plan to make use of the facility in the future? So, Ms. Devi Singh Prasad.
So I'd firstly like to thank the UWI Department of Economics and Trade Development, I hope I have it correct, for this opportunity to showcase to the participants some of the plans that NAMDEVCO as a marketing and development agency has in the very near future, plans that we've already started working on. Critical to it is the National GAP Certification Program. We project that this certification program is really going to do justice to the phrase, taking Trinidad and Tobago foods to the world. And that comes especially in light of, again, as I said, the food safety regulations that apply to, worldwide, the ability to trade food that is safe, food that is convenient, and food that has marketing ability. With respect to the question on the Muruga E-Tech Park, I am happy to announce that the parks is completed. The buildings, which are now called factory shells, are complete. There are also plots that are identified for agro-processors who have an interest to occupy a plot versus a factory shell that's a fixed space. The factory shells are currently being occupied by interested investors. Most, if not all, are private investors, persons with interest in processing hot peppers, persons with interest in processing other specific commodity groups inclusive of pineapples, rice, and a few other commodities. So the plant, the Muruga plant, is being populated at the present moment. NAMDEVCO will not be occupying a facility or a factory shell, if that's your question. However, in our facilitative role, we continue to provide market support for persons who require support to grow the markets for the products that will be coming out of those factory shells. And we're also going to provide support on the backstopping end to identify farmers who can successfully produce the quantity of raw materials that are required to ensure operational efficiency of the equipment that are going to be put into those shells to process those value-added products. We continue to remain available for technical support and any other support, inclusive of post-harvest handling technical support to all of the users of the Muruga E-Tech Park. And with that, I'd like to say thank you once again for the opportunity. We can be contacted at NAMDEVCO. Please feel free to email us at contact@namdevco.com. Visit our website, visit our NAMIST page, it's NAMISTT.com for real-time information based on price and volume data. And please feel free to give us, contact us at any time that you require any type of agriculture-based information, whether it's based on marketing, whether it's based on agronomy, anywhere along the value chain for agricultural commodities, we'd be very happy to assist.
Thank you very much for your contribution, Ms. Devi Singh Prasad. Now, before we continue, we have two questions here that I would like Ms. Franca Costello and Dr. Roger Hussein to address in their closing comments. So I'll give them to you both now. Ms. Costello, do you think that within 5 years, the manufacturing sector's contribution to the GDP can cross 30% of GDP? And for Dr. Hussein, we have, do you think that the implementation of the property tax can assist in balancing our budget? And if so, when are we likely to see that balance? So at this point, we will continue with our closing comments with Ms. Vashti Gayadeen, and then we move on to Ms. Costello and Dr. Hussein. Ms. Gayadeen.
Thank you, Christian. In closing, I saw a comment from Navnet Budai, which illustrates what I'm going to reemphasize. He stated most of the ideas presented do have been in discussions for some 5 to 10 years. The challenge is now not only to deliver on these goals, but also to get it done in both a timely and cost-effective manner. Therefore, we need to see some targets. And I would like to, on that point, this is an excellent commentary. It's, we need to refocus and reemphasize that the institutions that support services exportation needs to be re-strategized. But because what we have seen, and this is again based on research, that these current institutions in its current form are not equipped. In order for these services sector to grow and expand their market share, they need market intelligence, which these institutions right now are not able to provide. So we need a holistic rethinking and reconfiguration, realignment of these institutions. In closing, I would like to extend an invitation to everybody for the launch of the National Services Exporters results on Wednesday, 30th of September at 10 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. The Zoom link is available on our Facebook page.
Thank you very much for your contribution, Ms. Gayadeen. Next, we'd like to invite Ms. Costello to give her closing remarks. Ms. Costello.
Fine, Roger got the easier question, eh?
He did.
So I agree with the comments that targets are important and timelines so that you can track those targets. The reason why people generally don't like to do targets is because they don't like to fail and they don't like to be held accountable to that failure of not meeting that target by that end date. To be quite honest, I am not afraid of that. And we have set out the target of doubling the export goal at the end of 2025. And we didn't just pick it. We didn't just think that we could do this. We met with over 100 manufacturers. We interviewed all of them. We asked them what their export sales figures were now, and we asked them what they thought they could move it to. And we had consensus from all but one that said that they believe that we could double our export figure. And that is why this is a private sector driven initiative. And it's not about lobbying the government to make the changes to make export happen. This is something that we have to do in-house. And in designing the export strategy, we designed it like a business strategy. We want to get to this goal, and this is our strategic plan of how we're going to make it happen. And it's incremental along the way. And it is, you know, my great-grandmother told me that it's the cents that make up a dollar. And that is what really counts. And you start to move each cent to get to that dollar. And that is how it's going to happen. So, you know, we have Exim Bank here, and and that's why I'll pull on Navin, is that part of our KPIs was 100 million to 100 companies. Navin's going to do it. He has 3 months left, and he's going to close on that KPI. And that's why he's talking about his targets. He knows what he has to do in releasing restrictions. And also, you're absolutely right about data collection. Data collection is so important because that is how we can be held accountable to the small goals that make up the big goals. and report back on it, and not be afraid to report of a negative or decline, because that's the most important data when it's not going in your way. So you can analyze it, assess it, and retool it to fix it. If you shy away from the negative data or the things aren't going well, you're never going to get there. So it's really important that we recognize that the goal is achievable. We make the little steps towards it, to celebrate the wins when we have it. And most importantly, don't shy away from the things that aren't going our way. Explore them even more, poke holes and dig into it. And Roger, yes, you know, we benefited so much from Roger's inspiration when it came to the export strategy, and he was one of the founders in laying the foundation for us. Those pillars, those strategic pillars, Roger Hotzheim designed that with the TTMA. And that's the other great part about this strategic plan, is that we have gotten input from so many stakeholders and buy-in. And we know by known circumstances that that strategy is not perfect. And I expect it to be different come January 2021. Because if it is not changing and constantly adapting to the new climates, then it's failing. And that is the most important thing, that it has to be a living thing that changes to the environment around it. So I welcome all the critique of it and all the input. But most important is that we keep it alive and we keep it progressing and changing to get to that goal, because I do believe that we can do it. So, Tete, how do we get from 19% to 30% of the GDP? Little 1% at a time. 1% at a time, growing domestic capacity, investing in our best resource, which is people, taking advantage of our comparative advantages, our natural gas, our location, our good weather, our land, our agriculture, our creativity. You know, nobody comes close to the inspiration and innovation of a Trinidadian. You know, they say, put a Trinidadian in Toco and they want to go to Mass Carnival Monday, and put them through rainstorms and they can't get the bus and shoe fall off, but they're gonna be there on Carnival Monday, all the way from Toco. No, you know, Trinidadians find a way to do anything that they really want to do. And that is the innovation and creativity that we want to inspire any manufacturing industry, to the entrepreneurs, the SMEs, and the large manufacturers. So 1% at a time to get to that. So.
Thank you very much for your contribution, Ms. Costello. Next, I'd like to invite Mr. Dukaran, Mr. Navin Dukaran, to give his closing remarks. Mr. Dukaran.
Well, thank you, Christian, and thank you again to the Trade Development Unit and Roger to have invited me here as well. And my final words are going to be along the lines of, so our companies have had to do this dual currency management. We know there's a Forex gap at the individual company level. Well, the only way, you know, we're waiting for a vaccine to immunize us from the coronavirus. The only way for you to immunize yourself from national foreign exchange shortages is to earn more foreign exchange yourself. You have to export more. And I'm going to give you 2 tips and 2 reasons why you can do that, and you can do that from tomorrow, right? First of all, global supply chains have been shortened due to this coronavirus pandemic. A lot of the supply from China, people are saying, I need to make my supply chain more resilient right now. People and businesses are more open to actually considering switching suppliers at this exact point in time. The other piece, it has never been easier to do marketing and export and international marketing right now. It's now just a Zoom meeting. You don't have to do travel expenses. You don't have to get on the plane. You don't have to go to do the hotel. And everybody's accustomed now to say, well, a business meeting is a Zoom meeting. So this is your chance to get in front of potential clients. And even if you had a past client that had switched, they had started to buy, say, from China or lower cost producers, they may be willing to reconsider you now because of what has happened. So don't miss the opportunity. My last words are, let's get started now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution, Mr. Dukaran. And last but not least, we have Dr. Roger Hussain. Dr. Hussain.
Yeah, so I'd like to close off by saying thanks to Rebecca and Christian for making this happen. You know, you guys do all the work behind the scenes, and without you all, this seminar would not have come off so smoothly. In terms of the property tax would just be one element of the reform package needed. The government has a lot of work to do, and I suppose on Monday we would hear some announcements of some of the interventions they would make, but property tax would not dent the fiscal revenues in any meaningful way in terms of a 20 billion gap that we are currently facing or thereabouts. But what I really like in the closing questions, and I will therefore add one cent at a time to it, is the 30% of GDP. If we could get, and I am focusing on non-energy export GDP, because there is a little element of GDP that took place in the last few years with CSO, data collection transformation. I am focusing predominantly on non-energy export GDP. And if we could push that number up, say 12 percentage points in the next 5 years, that very act and that very transformation would go a long way towards infusing in the economy a lot of the relevant changes, because it would spill over to other sectors. And I think the KPIs in that regard are excellent, and we should really be aiming and pushing and backing the relevant segments of the economy that move in that direction. So it was a very, very good presentation by all the invited panelists, and we will share them with the students at the university. I myself learned quite a lot from you all, and we would like to say thank you on behalf of the Trade and Economic Development Unit. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks again to all of our panelists for coming out today and for your excellent contributions. I am certain that our participants, our audience, was definitely enlightened by, certainly we can see that from a lot of the comments in the chat, that they were definitely enlightened by your contributions. So thank you very much once again. And have a good night, everyone. Stay safe and keep masks on. Okay, take care, everyone.